chatting to Dan Roth, who's executive editor of LinkedIn. Dan is a former journalist who used to work at Wired and Fortune magazine, and he's going to tell us why he moved into a different environment, but it's all really to the theme that we're talking about, the power of influence, and how media is changing. You don't necessarily have to go through the media now to get your messages over, how you can talk directly to your consumers, and how you can still actually benefit from earned media through that. So Dan's going to talk a little bit about that, especially about the influencer program that LinkedIn runs and how that's going to develop. There's been some developments from that recently. So we'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then I'll open it up. I want to make it an interactive session, lots of questions, so please do get your thinking caps on for those. But first of all, let's welcome Dan Roth. So Dan, talk to us about this whole concept of influence in relation to the LinkedIn influencer program. And from your background as a journalist, the old days of selling a story in and getting coverage and doing it that way through the media, this is kind of bypassing it. Tell us a little bit about how it works and what's the unique selling point.
Sure. So maybe I'll explain the program a little bit.
Sure.
In October of 2012, we launched something called the Influencer Program. This was we'd already had on LinkedIn for about a year. So in 2011, we launched something called LinkedIn Today. It's now called Pulse. It was a way for about 1.6 million publishers to feed into LinkedIn, and then we matched headlines to the right professionals. So a story that was doing really well with people in the pharmaceutical industry, we would expose it to everyone in pharma. It's a very basic way to think about it. In October of 2012, we launched the Influencer Program, where we asked at the start about 120 top people in the professional world to start writing original content on LinkedIn. And when we launched, it was with people like Richard Branson, Barack Obama, the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, the CEO of IDEO, the CEO of William Morris Endeavor. We tried to cover most of the professional world. We looked at where our members were, what industries they were in, what companies they were with, where in their profession they were, and try to find voices that might help them better navigate their world. The thinking was that if you wanted to be like Richard Branson, if you were an insurance adjuster in Louisville, Kentucky, and you dreamed of having your own island like Branson, that the best person to learn from would be Richard Branson. And so we launched with about 120. It was phenomenally successful. And when I say that, I don't mean in terms of overall views, which were great, but really in terms of how the members responded. So every influencer post on average now gets 100 comments and about 30,000 views. The views are great again. The comments are what I really pay attention to, what my team pays attention to. When I was at Fortune, Wired, started a magazine called Portfolio, and Condé Nast before that, we always talked about this idea of engaging with the readers, but I don't think we ever had any idea whether we were actually doing it or not. And what you could see with the influencer program, and now with posting in general on LinkedIn, is that when someone writes something, they can tell instantly whether they've started a conversation. And so we think about this kind of writing less as being about putting your message out there than about getting people to take your message and run with it.
So Richard's the secret sauce behind that. Everybody's aiming for that. Like we're aiming for that at the Harvard DR Week, and every journalist is aiming for that. Every brand is aiming for that. What are the things that have really worked to stimulate that conversation and that interactivity?
I'll talk about what's worked and what hasn't worked. Might be helpful too. Is that there's a couple little tricks that do work. Number one, asking a question at the end of a post actually does work, especially if it's a good question. How have you seen this impact what you do? What do you think is coming next? It's related to the story. It's understanding what it is that makes people comment. On LinkedIn, you have, and this might be an unusual use case, but on LinkedIn, no one's anonymous. So when people respond, and when they make a comment, their comments are, number one, identified with them. Every time I comment, you can see that Deen Roth of LinkedIn has said this. And it stays with me forever. This is my permanent record. And when I comment, everyone in my network sees it. Your boss sees it, your employees see it, your network sees it, your future boss sees it. So people are pretty respectful in what they say. But even more so, they're using it as a way to explain who they are. So Richard Branson writes some post, or let's take someone else. Mohammed Al-Arian from PIMCO writes a post, talks about where the world economy is going, what he sees. And people respond. They're not responding to Muhammad Al-Arian. They're responding to their networks. And what they are responding with is only sometimes related directly to what Muhammad said. They are saying something that helps them stand out from the crowd, to make them look good for their boss or for some future employer, or to some business partner they want to do business with. So that idea of thinking about what the community would get out of commenting, I think, is a different way to think about how to build this community.
And to get that to be effective, you've got to have a community of scale with enough people. There's nothing worse than asking a question and having a tumbleweed blowing through and nobody answering. But if you've got a scale, which LinkedIn has, I guess, then you are going to get responses.
There's two parts to that. Number one is you want to be where the audience is. I think we've moved away from a point where we assume that if you build it, they will come. So many people have, a lot of companies have spent so much money building intranets and great blogging sites, and then they find they get very little traffic because you're asking people to change their patterns of their habits. And there's a million things to click on. There's a billion things to click on. You are not going to go to some random company's website to go read something. You only get there if your friend or your neighbor or someone you admire has said, go check this out. Or if you're already on the site, if you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, you're seeing other things that are around that are related. Someone has said this is related to what you're doing already, you might click on it.
So if you're a CEO and you're looking at the potential of maybe getting an interview with the New York Times versus doing an influencer post on LinkedIn, how would you compare those two things? New York Times is everybody's aspiration to get hired, but on LinkedIn you have complete control pretty much. I assume you can talk about the editing process, but your message is going directly out there.
We get this question a lot, especially from communication folks at companies, and they say, my CEO, look, I'm really pitching this hard, I love this idea. The influencer program is an invite-only program. We have a list of people that we're going after. We reach out to them and say, we'd like for you to do this. And if they say no, we'll say fine, we will keep moving on down our list. And some of the feedback we get is, well, look, my CEO doesn't do anything like this. And the only place that she wants to be, or he wants to be, is in the FT. And the argument that we frequently make back is, that's fine if you want to reach other CEOs. If the goal is for your CEO to be seen and to have his conversation, his point of view, be talked about within a very small club, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's not snarky, it really does make a lot of sense. But I think where the world is today, there's so much that happens by getting people to buy into your message. It is a much more bottoms-up world than it used to be. You want the crowd to believe in what you're saying and to argue for your point of view within their companies, within their communities. And you don't do that by writing for very small. You do that by trying to engage with the world. The other part is that there's a lot of data that you get back when you write as an influencer. You see who your followers are. You see what industries they're in. You see where in the world they are. You can see whether your message worked or didn't work. How many page views did you get? How many likes? How many shares? You can see how it was shared across different platforms. There's a lot of data that will tell you whether what you said worked or not. And that doesn't happen when you are writing for a traditional media site. You definitely get, it's a lot of prestige, but you don't necessarily get the data back.
So, what are the examples of posts that really, caught fire and caught the imagination, and you literally got thousands of comments? What are a couple of real notable ones?
Sure. So, it happens a lot. Anytime anyone writes about, there's a couple topics that always catch fire. If it's something about career failure, people love those kind of posts. It's about people succeeding after a career failure, and I think this goes back to the idea of authenticity really works well. Influencers who have been willing to admit that they have done something wrong do really incredibly well. Influencers, and I don't think this is true just on LinkedIn, it's true everywhere, writers who say, we've been incredibly successful and we're really proud of what we've done, that does pretty bad. So an example of that, Sally Krawcheck, very well known on Wall Street. She's the head of, she bought 85 Broad recently, which is a Wall Street networking site for women. And she was the former head of Merrill. She wrote about what she learned from getting fired. And it was a great post about, and very raw about what it was like to be fired. And the comments just filled up. Most people have been there. And they responded. They were not just responding again to Sally, they were responding to their network, talking about what they personally learned and how they grew from being fired. And which she did a follow-up post called "What Else I Learned from Being Fired," which also did well. So that's incredibly successful. Anything on how technology is changing the world, people go absolutely crazy for that. Drones, when Amazon was talking about sending drone packages, that was something that did very well. We have really encouraged the influencers to post about news topics. We, as an editor, we have a small editorial team with editors who come from the AP, Reuters, Wired, Figaro, the Wall Street Journal, and every day we have an edit meeting. We look at what's trending on LinkedIn, what's trending in the news, what's trending elsewhere, and then we pitch stories to influencers. We pitch about 50 to 60 stories a day.
So you're proactively going to them as well as them coming to you.
And because they have the same blank page problem that everyone has. What am I supposed to write about? And especially when you, at this level, a lot of the CEOs don't necessarily, what they see every day is just things happening internally at their company. And we know from experience, and the metrics show us this, that PR, the pieces that are seen as just PR, we're very pleased to announce that we've merged with X, Y, and Z company. Those do horribly. People don't respond at all. No one cares about that. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't solve the what's in it for me problem.
Do you let them through, or do you say to them, "Look, this is not going to work, you need to go back and rework it"? Where does the editing process come in from LinkedIn?
It's a publish first model. So we will encourage them, if they have any questions, to run it by the editors first. They don't have to. Most don't. The biggest benefit that we have is that all the metrics are public. And so when they do write these posts, we'll get someone, we'll say, all right, we're going to publish a post tomorrow announcing we're building a new hospital in Dubai. And the feedback is always, that's not going to do very well. Put it on your blog. Don't put this on your influencer. It doesn't help anyone. And if we're dealing with a PR person, they'll typically say, well, it's already signed off on. I'm sorry, we're going to do it. So fine, they publish. And then the stats come in. 100 views, 500 views, when they're used to getting 50,000, 60,000 views. No likes, one comment. There's no community, there's no conversation that forms out of it. At that point, the editors step in and say, hey, remember that last post you did that we didn't think was going to do well? It actually didn't do very well. And here's some posts that have done well. Here's how you should think about being more authentic and more engaging in what you write, and why this is a win-win for everyone. You do well, people come and they follow you, they come back to LinkedIn to find more content, and so it builds on
these
itself.
people are very competitive, aren't they?
Incredibly.
So they want to have more follows and more comments than the other people on the program, don't
And
they?
more, it is amazing. I don't know if I should say the name, but I'm going to say it. The president of the World Bank sent a note the other day. He's one of our most successful influencers, and he pointed out who he just passed in terms of follows, and he said, here's where I'm going next. Hunter Walk, who's a venture capitalist, will tweet every time he passes someone on LinkedIn. And then Conan O'Brien, who's one of our influencers, has made a sport out of showing who he's beating an influencer.
So we've had Brian Wong here this morning speaking, and we've got Brian Solis later. How competitive are they?
Well, let's find out. We should point out how much better they could be doing if they post more. But I'll tell you, as someone who has spent a career trying to encourage writers to write more, and how much time I've devoted in my life to massaging very easily bruised egos of writers. And as a writer, I can tell you that I definitely fit into that camp, and I've had editors do that with me. Totally different from dealing with CEOs. It is the numbers and the competitiveness. And oh yeah, you went to HBS with this person, and she's doing much better than you're doing. And suddenly, the fire starts, and they want to write better content.
Is it better for their personal branding as a CEO, or is it better for the branding of the company? How does that sort of dynamic play out?
I think that it's a combination. One feeds on the other. An example of that would be the CEO of Redfin, Glenn Kelman, who's a phenomenal writer. I mean, just an incredible, not just a writer and influencer, but just a great writer. And he has talked about how much his influencer posts have changed how regulators and industries that they work with have changed how they view Redfin. It's also a great recruiting tool. If you want to know what makes a company tick, you might want to look at the head. You might want to see if the culture emanates from the person at the top, how does this person view the world? and taking a peek at that and seeing how they are seeing what the state of their industry is, what the future of their company is, how they hire, how they fire, are they humble, are they not humble? It makes a huge difference for recruiting.
What do you think this says about the sort of the culture of the personality CEO? Can you draw any conclusions from having done this for a number of years, dealt with a lot of different CEOs? You can't be a CEO who has had a cult develop around him or herself and expect to do well here. It is all about the content. If you are amazingly successful and you are sought after and you're someone that other people want to work with or have had books written about you or case studies done about you, if you write bad content, people won't read it and they won't talk about it. It doesn't start a conversation. It is all about the content. And we launched, I don't know if you want to talk about this right now, but we launched the ability for anyone to start writing on LinkedIn. Yeah, so you've opened up a platform
Yeah.
now. What's the thinking behind that? Because the thing about the influencer program is it's an elite group, it's invitation
Right.
only. But now you've opened the platform up. Talk us through that and how that could play into what you're trying to do, but also what people might be trying to do with communicating their messages.
So even when we launched the influencer program, the initial thinking was this: we knew from the beginning that the total wisdom of the professional world wasn't in these 120 now 500 people's heads. That there is something that everyone can bring to the table in terms of insights into how their industries work, how their jobs work, how they got where they got, what mistakes they made along the way, etc. And so in mid-February, we launched the ability for anyone to start writing on LinkedIn. Now, the big difference between influencer and being an influencer and writing as a member is that as a member, you are writing for your network. With the ability for it to go much broader, it lives on the open web, you can share it over social, it can be put into various channels on LinkedIn. But it starts with your network. You are writing for the people you're already connected with. And what we expected to see, and luckily what's actually happened, is that a lot of this is incredible, very deep, long-tail content that is someone in business talking to their peers. And so it could be someone who is a scientist, this is a real post which I won't describe well because I didn't quite understand it, but it was a scientist talking about how if you're going to be doing riverbed analysis, how you want to think about putting your team together to go do that riverbed analysis. And he said he disagrees with how other people have done this in the past. Now again, I have no idea what he's talking about. But it was very clear that this was something that had been debated within his industry. And he was taking a contrarian point of view, and he was using data to back it up. He did really well for that industry. These are not posts that get 50,000, 100,000, a million views. But if they get 500 of the right views, that's all that you can hope for.
They're very influential.
Exactly.
So for the people in the audience who are looking to maybe build their own brand, or they're looking to use this program or this platform as part of their marketing strategy, what would your sort of top tips be for them to make the most of it?
So we're rolling it out right now. It hasn't been launched to every member, but if anyone in this room wants to get in early, we can get you signed up. So you can come and talk to me afterwards. And my colleague Amy Chen, who's the editor on the team, is in the very back. Raise your hand. You can go find her and give her your email address. We'll get you set up. But I think that where it really gets exciting is when companies start on the individual level. It makes sense for everyone to be posting. It connects to your profile. And so anything you write, again, your network sees it. It's a great way to flex, to show off what you know. But what gets me even more excited is the idea about companies and industry groups forming their own influencer programs. The idea that if you are UPS and you decide that you want to own the idea of logistics, you have the smartest people in the logistics industry working for your company. And so you go out and ideally if you're in UPS communications, you reach out to 50 managers and you say, hey, I want you to start writing about the logistics of moving packages by freight and by train and by whatever it is, and how do you route things. But I have no idea again. Drone delivery. How does weather play into it? If you ask your meteorologist, how does weather play a part? Whatever it is, you start generating all this content, and from the UPS company page, you're promoting the content. You're saying, here's a great one around, how the recent